Once upon a time,
in a land far away.
I'm Katrina.
And I'm Geoff.
This is the Fairy Tellers Podcast.
Myth, legend, folklore, fable.
We explore what they say about cultures then and now,
Grab a hot cup of cocoa and a comfy seat
while we tell you a tale.
Welcome back to the podcast. Katrina, to start us off, I have some exciting news.
Ooh.
And that is that out of nowhere, my son the other day asked me if we could read Grimm's Brothers fairy tales.
Oh my gosh.
It might be the fact that we have like 4 or 5 copies of like the Grimm's complete fairy tales or whatever. For some strange reason, we have like just a bunch of copies. But I don't even like. And I asked him too. He was like, "I don't know. I just wanted to read it." I was like, "I don't." He probably learned about it at school or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it got mentioned or something, and he had like a vague inkling that he had heard that before and knew something about it, or knew that his parents knew something about it. And so he was like, "Huh."
And some of the books, like one of the reasons why we have so many copies of it is because some of them are just really cool looking copies. And that might be it too. Because I remember that was the same thing that happened with me. And I guess I was older than he is now. But when I came across my grandfather's old copy of Arabian Nights Entertainments, just like some version of 1001 Nights, we thought that we had solved the mystery, but we were wrong. I don't want to go and like check what the answer is now. We thought it was like the Lang's version.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's some other version that's like even more like, hey, this is, and it says somewhere, and it's like, oh, this has been edited for fairy tales. Anyway, but the point is, I saw that book on the shelf, and it looks really cool because it was old. It's from like 1913, and it looks cool, and it had cool like illustrations in it. And I was like, ooh, because this book looks cool, judging it 100% by its old-fashioned and fancy cover, I was like, I'm going to read this, and I did, and I enjoyed it. But the other thing too is we've read like the past few nights, a couple stories a night, because some of them were really, really short, and we're just reading like from the beginning of the collection and going. And he's like been loving it, which is fun. So it's happening, Katrina.
I love that. No, do you know what's funny is my daughter, she's gotten really into the TV show Gravity Falls. So then she was like, Mom, do you know? No, I think that she knew from a friend that one of the journal that this kid in the TV show like found, that's full of like a bunch of the mysteries of the city Gravity Falls and all of the anomalies, they had like produced and were selling like a version like of that book. And so she asked me if I could find it so that she could like read it. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Because literally, like anything that promotes reading and like literature, in my house, I don't care what it is. I will get my kid any Captain Underpants. Like I don't care. Like,
oh yeah, for sure.
So if a kid comes to me and they're like, "Hey, I heard that there's a book and I want to get a hold of it." Yeah, I'm like, of course I will get a hold of this book for you. So I got it for her. And she was like flipping through it. And she flipped to this one page that said Mothman and it had a bunch of information. And she like turned to me and she was like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, you were right. There is a Mothman." And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Because it's like there's just something like in kids' brains where they're like, my parents
are liars and stupid idiots that don't know anything. Yeah. But this cartoon, because it said that this thing is a thing, no questions. It's absolutely, yes, of course.
Like, I guess Mothman is a cryptid. Okay, so after I said that, like, I also am like realizing right now in this moment, like, as I'm like, why would I lie about Mothman? I did invent the Onion Lady.
That's true.
And like a whole holiday that we then started celebrating like as a family, which then when my daughter was like talking to like other kids about it, they're like, what are you talking about?
It's a Swedish thing, an old Swedish thing.
So yeah, I'm like, why would she think that I don't know what I'm talking about like Mothman being a cryptid? And then I'm like, okay, well, the Onion Lady thing did happen. So
so she is justified in her skepticism.
She's justified.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Love it. Love it for our children.
Yeah.
But this episode's not about our children, nor is it about cryptids, nor is it about the Brothers Grimm in any way. Although it's hard to go a whole episode without mentioning the Brothers Grimm. This one, with the quick tease that I know of that the podcast is about, I do feel like it might be one of the ones that could go an entire podcast without really having to reference Brothers Grimm whatsoever.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
So you just snuck him in at the beginning?
Yeah, just had to contractually obligated by our sponsors.
The Grimm's brothers. No, that'd be wild.
That would be insane.
But this episode should be fun. At the beginning of the year, we talked kind of quickly about how our not project of the year is basically doing some fun tales that like we come across and are just fun to tell. That will also be interesting for some great discussion. This episode, especially, I'm really interested to discuss because we're going to be talking about Ethiopian tales and the culture in Ethiopia, and the things that people value are in some ways slightly different than the culture that I was raised in. And it is reflected in some of these stories. Some of the themes that I'm talking about are valuing people as a collective versus individualism. And that'll be reflected in the stories. I thought it was really interesting while I was reading through this book of Ethiopian tales, how much the stories went back to the fact that we are supposed to work as a collective instead of like rugged individualism. And the culture in the United States is very much built on rugged individualism. And so they were so different than tales that would have been produced in the United States. And so I really, really enjoyed them and they were fun. So I thought that this would be a fun episode with some interesting tales that we definitely have not covered before and some interesting discussion on cultural values and how they get reflected inside of stories, but mostly just fun to retell stories.
Nice.
So the book that I got these tales from, it is a book that is specifically for children. So again, I don't know how many parents like listen to our podcast, but I have like a special interest in like early childhood education. That's like where I kind of started off my interest in stories, folklore and fairy tale, and like presenting them to kids. And so anytime we're actually telling stories from a book that are appropriate for children, I get excited. I think that's like exciting because we also know that sometimes I'm reading books where it's some sketchy stuff. So the book where I got these tales, it's called When the World Began, Stories Collected in Ethiopia by Elizabeth Laird. So the first story that I am going to be retelling is The Shield of Kindness. So there was once an old man and he had 3 sons. Obviously, you need 3 because fairy tale, rule of 3s, we got this. And as old men are wont to do, this guy was getting old. But his sons, they loved him dearly and they were fine, upstanding, good men, and their dad loved them. They loved him. A lot of good happiness like inside this family. But the only spot of unhappiness in the family was that they had this deceitful and greedy neighbor who was a wicked merchant who was constantly trying to steal from them, and he would threaten their lives. He was just a real jerk. They did not like him at all. Because of, when people threaten your life, it's just hard to like them.
I have found that to be true. Yeah.
So as this old man was getting closer and closer to death, he called his sons to him and he said to them, "My children, I've lived a long and happy life. My death is getting closer. Before I die, I wanted to give you my blessing so that you know always, you can carry with you the knowledge that I love you, cherish you, care about you. But I also want to pass everything I possess to you, my cattle, my fields, my trees, my hut. I want you 3 sons to share all of those things equally amongst yourselves. And, the sons were really sad to hear that their dad, was starting to die, but they felt good by his blessing that he was going to, split up all of his possessions equally among them. But yeah, just sad. And then their father said to them, the one item that I have that I can't split up between you is my father's shield. So that shield, it belonged to my father and his grandfather and his grandfather. And it's the most precious thing that I own. And I can only give one of you this item to inherit. And so the 3 sons, were kind of like looking at their dad being like, yeah, so which one of us is going to be? Because they all wanted to inherit, their father's shield because it carried this like big family history. So they're kind of like, all right, who's he going to give it to? And so the old man said that he was going to give them a test that all 3 of them, he already knew that they were good, strong, and brave, but he felt that the greatest quality anybody could have was kindness. And it's so interesting to me, Geoff, because we just did that episode with Not My Fantasy Podcast where the Disney's like live Snow White, the father kind of had these qualities that he wanted like his kid to have. And we were talking so much about how it was really close to Disney's live action Cinderella, where they were like, have courage and be kind, have courage and be kind, have courage and be kind. And so often I feel like kindness seems to be like a lady's virtue when we're talking about it in the Western cultures, like European cultures, where it's like kindness is like so important for women, but less important for guys. Because the qualities that are like, I know you guys are strong and you're brave, but are you kind? And so I was like, that's already such an interesting departure from what I'm kind of like used to.
Yeah.
And so this dad was saying, yeah, greatest quality of all is kindness. So I want all 3 of you to go out and perform kind deeds and come back to me before I die and tell me the kindest deed that you've done. And whoever has shown themselves to be the kindest of all will inherit the family shield. So the 3 sons went off and they traveled all around Ethiopia looking for chances to do kind deeds, which already I'm like, that beautiful. All of us should be like, go forth and just start doing kind deeds and then, let me know what the kindest one is when you get back. It's like, because it's just like perpetuates kindness, kindness like begets kindness. Like, so it's like a spreading ripple effect. So already I'm like, I love this. Anyway, so they all went out doing kind deeds, making the world a better place. And then they returned after a while to their father's hut to tell them what they had done. So he was like, all right, sons, tell me what you've done. And the oldest one said, in my travels, I went all the way to the sources of the Nile, which I don't know if anybody knows like the history of like finding the source of the Nile.
I do not.
Are you serious? Do you know who was part of the expedition? No, you just said that you were like, you're like, I don't know.
You've talked about this before. I can't remember who it is, but it is someone that is like a folklore or like a collector of tales. That was kind of wild.
Yeah, that I'm like not a fan of.
Yeah.
Sir Richard Burton.
That's right.
The Englishman. Oh man, even when I was reading Spectres of the Marvelous by Kimberly Lau, he came up as doing something else, like saying other stuff where I was like, this is absolutely despicable.
Because he did like it was 1001 Nights that he did like a version of, right? That he just like embellished stuff because he wanted to.
Yeah, and so he made it like more racist and more sexist because he thought that then would make the stories kind of like sell better through his like subscription of his translation of the tales, because you couldn't publish them in like British society without them being related to a subscription service, because like there was stuff that would have been deemed like inappropriate for like a general audience. And so he then was like, I'm going to make it more sexist and more racist. Like, great, buddy. Perfect. That's what a translation is. Anyway, But yeah, the search for the source of the Nile went on for a really, 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 really long time because the Nile is so long, and it goes back to Lake Victoria, named after Queen Victoria because the people who claim to have discovered the source of the Nile were British.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been argued that obviously the people who are native to the area.
Yeah, they discovered it a long time ago.
Like they'd been on this body of water for a while and had followed it to down various other places. But anyway, Ethiopia, in case people were interested, since I already have the map pulled up, Ethiopia has a kind of an offshoot, the Nile. It's the section of it is called the Blue Nile. From Lake Victoria, which is in Tanzania and Kenya, and I think Uganda, it looks like it touches. You have the White Nile, and then in Ethiopia, you have a branch of the Blue Nile, and they meet up together in the Sudan and then go on down to Egypt. That then leads into the Mediterranean Sea. So when we're talking about, he was an Ethiopian, he was wandering and found the source of the Nile, they'd be talking about Lake Tana, which is the source of the Blue Nile.
Interesting.
This is a geography podcast.
Yes.
This is a rivers and tributaries podcast. We haven't used that one before.
No.
That's a new one.
That's a good one.
So anyway, this first son, we got off tangent. We got off topic. So the oldest said, "Father, in my travels, I went all the way to the source of the Nile. And as I stood at the very place where the great river leaves Lake Tana, which is the Blue Nile, I saw a woman standing by the bank shouting and crying because her baby had fallen into the water. The river was deep there and infested with crocodiles, but I risked my life. I jumped in and rescued the baby. Wasn't that an act of kindness?" And the father, very impressed with his son and his son's bravery. He was like, "That was indeed a kindness. You did very well. I'm very proud of you. But you were acting only as a human being should do. No one could have stood back and just let a baby die." Which I'm like, I don't know, buddy. Maybe some people. No. Fair enough. So the father turns to the second son, is like, "Second son, what have you been doing in your travels?" And the second son said, "Well, father, I have traveled far from home. And as I was walking past through a deep valley where a bunch of leopards were lurking among the rocks and vultures were circling overhead, I met a man who was carrying 100 silver dollars. He wanted to go to the market to buy food, so he said to me, 'My friend, please take care of my money for me and don't let anyone steal it while I'm gone.'" Which I don't understand why this guy was like, maybe it's heavy. Maybe that's why. I was like, why was he like, "Hey, I don't want to walk all the way carrying this 100 silver dollars. Can you hold this for me while I go down to the market?" Anyway, but that is what the man did. And so the second son had agreed to watch this guy's money while he walked down to the market to buy food. And so he just waited, standing there, holding all of his money. And when the man returned, the son said that he returned all of his money to him. And the man was so impressed by his honesty that he offered to pay him 10 silver dollars as a reward for being so honest and watching his money and staying there. And the second son refused the money and said, "The money's yours, keep it." "Now, father, wasn't that kind of me?" And his father was like, "Yes, that was very honest. That was very brave. And you showed that you have no great love for money. But that wasn't real kindness. You were just being a decent person, not stealing from this guy." Which I kind of I agree with him in that it's baseline, you shouldn't steal. That should just be, that's baseline behavior. It's not stealing.
You don't get credit for not doing a bad thing.
Yeah. But standing there holding the guy's money for him while he went to do, it's okay, that was kind, but it wasn't he was just well, it wasn't that much. Still kind. But the father was waiting to hear some real good stuff. He's like, "No, kinder than that. More. Give me more." So he turns to his third son and he said, "Tell us, what kindness have you done?" And the third son said, "Well, I walked for many miles across deserts and plains until I came to some high mountains. And I was resting up on those high mountains where hyenas were howling and eagles were swooping down on their prey. And I suddenly saw our old neighbor, the merchant, who had, tried to steal our property in the past and had threatened our lives and just been kind of a no good, dirty, rotten scoundrel to us, like our whole lives, making our really happy lives like just a little bit, difficult. This guy made our lives like more difficult. And I could see that he was lying close to the edge of an abyss on this cliff that we were up on. And he was fast asleep and he was in danger of rolling over and then falling to his death. And I realized that if I called out to him suddenly and if he woke up and was startled, he might think I was attacking him and he might jump back and fall over the cliff. So I took hold of him gently, and before he was fully awake, I dragged him away from danger and I left him in a field to sleep peacefully. And the boy's father was very pleased when he had heard all of this. And he said, "My son, you did very well. Your act of kindness was one of true kindness, because this man has been a curse to us and our family for many years. But you didn't take revenge on him, but you saved his life." And so the old man gave the shield to his third son because he had learned the true meaning of kindness. I really liked this story. I liked the message of that, like that valuing those pro-social behaviors of like, we need to show kindness to other people. We need to look out for other people besides ourselves. And also the fact that it was making kindness like a masculine quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not that like my culture doesn't value kindness, but it's a lesson that like we don't really hear in like this type of way that often. Because anytime that we're looking at kindness in like folklore and fairy tales from Europe, where you have like the kind and the unkind sister, like a lot of the time it is women, where they're saying like women need to be kind, but men usually need to be brave and strong and witty. In stories, they value wit in women too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, kindness really isn't like the rewarded quality in men in a lot of European stories.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it never happens, but it's rarer.
Yeah, and it even seems like I feel maybe I'm wrong. I can't think of an example, but I feel like there are a bunch of stories that we have come in contact with on this podcast where like male characters were not kind.
Yeah.
But because they were, like, I don't know, like I feel like there's a lot of them, and this is a different thing too, but like there are lots of these like trickster characters, and it's like they're doing things that are like not kind, and they're like circling back. Here we go, bringing in the Brothers Grimm. One of the stories that I read tonight to my son was one about like a tailor, which we actually read it wasn't tonight, but the other day we read the Brave Little Tailor or whatever. But then we read a different one about a tailor, which is like the tailor. I'm like, oh, it's like a trickster character. But anyway, like, oh, no. It was the poor farmer. That's what it was. And so like the poor farmer, who's the protagonist of this story, is like going around and basically like tricking people and like cheating them out of their money and like, and getting people killed. Like there's a part in the story, spoilers, where like he's been sentenced to death because of some like trick that he pulled that people are like caught on about. But then he like tricks a different guy to take his spot in this like barrel that they're going to roll into the water and like drown him. He like tricks a guy into doing that. And then like he tricks people into like thinking that they can go find some sheep, and these people end up like going into like the happy ending to the story is that everyone in the town drowns in this river. And so that our poor farmer is now rich because he has like inherited everything that all these people own, And it's like, he's clever. And so that's great, even though he was like very unkind to a lot of people, Yeah. And that's an extreme example, but I feel like that sort of thing happens a lot where, they're not, so not only are they not saying that they're like, that you should be kind, but they're showing that it's not important by, we talk about this all the time too, where it's like the stacking of values, like what values are more important than others. And like, we may have this, lots of us may have the same values, but when it comes to a point where we have like two values that are not conflicting, but like can't both be fulfilled maximally. Like, which one will we choose to put over the other? And kindness is one that like constantly gets shoved to the bottom in these stories about like men.
Yeah.
Or in these like male characters.
Yeah.
Whereas like the complete opposite with female characters, it's like, oh, like they were kind to the point that it was harmful to them. And that is good that they were able to be kind even in this like situation, you know?
Yeah. No, I think that was a perfect example. And I love that it was because you had like just read that to your
like
kid.
An hour ago.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, wow. Full circle moment for us on the podcast. No, that was like a perfect example because it is like that shows exactly the like, oh yeah, when these stories are when they're being told for fun, they're being told for entertainment around a fire to each other. And, you know, the Brothers Grimm tried to pretend like, oh, some of these are didactic lessons like that can be used like for kids or whatever. But really, when originally they'd been collecting the tales, they were household like tales. And so, but even when you just are telling those tales for like entertainment and not didactic like purposes, you are like showing your values and you're reiterating those values to anybody who's like listening to the story and enjoying the story. And so it is like reinforcing this idea that like, hey, if you have to step on everybody to get ahead, that's what you have to do. That's what you have to do. Like when it comes to what's more important, money or kindness in that situation, it's like, well, obviously like money. And so it was really interesting when I'm reading these stories in this book of like Ethiopian tales. And every now and then there was like a story like this one that really stuck out to me where I was like, that's not where I thought that the story was going to go. Or like that is strikingly different from what I'm used to. And so I'm like, oh, I'm going to, you know, pick out this story to retell because it is strikingly different in a really interesting way. Because it's like, if I'm reading Grimm's fairy tales and you've got all this like violence against other people is good and or justified, not necessarily good, but like justified. And then it's like, oh, but then in these stories, they're like, no, not that. So another story that is going to absolutely reiterate what we were talking about of like the differences in, kind of like cultural values being highlighted is this next story that Geoff is going to be retelling. And it is called The Best Home.
The Best Home. An old man who had 2 sons called them in to see him one day. And he said, sons, which I'm like, oh man, I relate. I feel old and I have 2 sons. And I'm often calling them in to discuss something with them. But that's where the relatability to me ends.
Do not feel like you're inching towards death, Jeffrey.
Unfortunately, I do.
Well, at least you're inching and not like galloping towards death.
Yeah, that's the way to approach death. Inch by inch. So this old man who was inching closer to death by the day brought his sons into him and he said, I want to see you 2, my beloved sons, happily settled before I die. So I want both of you to go out and build a home and then come back after a month and tell me how you've done. And so the 2 sons hurried away to start making homes for themselves. And so the first son, he went into the forest and he was cutting down some trees and he carried them to this like beautiful site by the side of a river and began to build himself a bunch of like just beautiful huts. And this son said, well, brother, have you cut trees to make the framework for your huts? And the younger brother's like, no, I've been visiting my friend, his family. They've been super kind to me. You know, they treat me like I'm a son and they told me I can stay with them whenever I like. And the older brother says, ugh, you're a fool. And he goes on and he cuts, lays for his walls of the huts and he mixes straw in mud to cover them. So he's working on these huts and everyone can see just the top-notch craftsmanship and how nice these huts are going to be. And then the older brother goes to the younger brother again and says, hey, have you started mixing the straw and mud to build the walls of your huts? Have you started like cutting the planks to put up in the walls? And the younger brother's like, oh no, I was visiting another friend. It's like we've become blood brothers and we've exchanged eternal vows of friendship. BFFs.
Yes. Man, you and I should do that.
We should.
Become blood brothers.
Yes. Someday. And he's like, I can eat at this, my blood brother and BFF's house whenever I am hungry. And the older brother's like, oh my gosh, you're so stupid. Why are you so stupid? And then he goes off to fetch more straw to make some roofs to go over his huts. And when he had finished making the roofs, he turned to his brother. Not turned. It's not like he was like right next to him. He went to his brother and to check in on him. He was like, "Hey, have you cut the straw to make the thatch roofs for your huts yet?" And his brother's like, "No, not yet. There was another family that's made me like a really close friend, and they told me that I'm their adopted son, and they begged me to come and visit them and spend time with them whenever I can." And so by the end of all this, a month had passed, and the two brothers came home to see their father. And their father said, "Well, my sons, let me see your homes." And so the eldest son, filled with pride, took his father to see his home, all these beautiful huts. He went through the compound that was surrounded by a nice fence with thorns. And the father was looking around like admiringly at, again, really good craftsmanship, seeing like how nice they were. He's like, "Oh, this is pretty nice." And then he walked into the first hut, or not into it, but outside, and he said, "Is there anyone in this hut? Is anyone going to come out and offer us some food?" And the older son said, "No, no one's here." And so then the old man walked to the second hut. He calls into it. He's like, "Hello?" But there was no one in that hut either. And then he's like, "Oh, well, this is the finest and biggest hut of them all. Like, there's got to be someone in there, right? Like someone that can bring out a cow skin for us all to sit on and hang out." And the son is like, "No, the hut's empty." And the old man's like, "Okay, well, I'm tired and I'm hungry and I'm thirsty. Let's go home." And so they do. And then the next day, it's the younger brother's turn. And so he says, "Take us to see your home." And so the younger brother takes his father and brother to the first family that he had befriended. And they welcomed all three of them with open arms and gave them a huge feast, offering them more food than they could possibly eat. Then they went to the second family, who'd taken in the son as if he were their own. And they slaughtered a sheep for him and plied them with food and drink until the sun went down.
Nice.
And then they went to the third family, who had also taken the younger son into their hearts. And they killed a cow in his honor and entertained their three guests as if they were princes. So the old man set off for home, completely full of food and great memories, I'm sure. And he turns to the first son and said, "You did well, my son, to build yourself such fine huts, but they are sad and cold and empty. They are not a real home." And then he looked at his younger son and said, "You have done better. You have found love and warmth and friendship. That's what a true home should be, and you'll reap its benefits for the rest of your life." The end.
I had, like, the first time that I read that story, I had such conflicting reactions inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not how I thought that the story was going to end, like, at all. Because, like,
yeah, it seems like the second son is like, it's like because we would. I was sort of expecting a story about like hard work. It's like, oh, he's procrastinating. He's not doing the stuff. He's just off partying and like,
yeah,
having fun.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of, like the story of like the little red hen that's like doing all of this work so that she can be prepared. Or I think it's also like the ants and the grasshoppers, I think is one where it's like the ants work all summer and like the grasshoppers just play music.
Yeah. I saw that movie.
Oh my gosh. Like, I've seen A Bug's Life, Katrina. They come, they eat, they leave. We get it. The grasshoppers, that's what they do. But that's where I was expecting kind of the story to go, was this kind of like, oh, this kid, he's not industrious enough. He's like not working hard to be building these, because like the culture that I'm used to is very much like about industry, like
hustle, grind.
Yeah, you have to be like accomplishing these like measurable goals, measurable with things, with like wealth. And yes, he was building all of these things, working really, really hard. And so like the conflict internally for me is like that I'm so used to like the reward being like the person who physically put in the most work, worked the hardest to like create, like gets rewarded. But also like I love like that message of like what makes a home, what makes you safe in society, like what is going to like keep you or give you a good life are the people that are inside of it. It's the relationships that you have. And I 100% believe that. But it's one of like when you were talking about stacking values.
Yeah, I was thinking that same thing too. I was like, I'm like, my stacked values are coming back again, baby.
Yeah.
Because the father says that he still says that it was good. Like what he says, you've done well to build such fine huts. Like you worked hard and you reap the rewards of that hard work, which is having these really nice huts. But
I feel like it's great. Or like the dad saying to him, like, this is great. You've built all of these fine houses. Now go and make them a real home by filling them with friends.
Yeah. And he still can.
Yeah. And the son also can now have help from friends to build his houses.
Yeah.
And so it's like in that way, it's like they don't necessarily have to have one over the other, but they definitely, when they were stacking those values, like they picked one first. Like they prioritize like different things. And this story, it made me think about my move across the country a lot, because like moving away from a place that I've been living for like a decade and leaving behind like all my friends, that hurt worse than like leaving the house that we were in. It's like, okay, the house, whatever. And we're still not in like a long term, like where we want to be living house wise long term in the new city that we moved to. And so like that feels a little unsettling. But what feels like kind of the most unsettling is trying to get back a network of friends.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, I'm under a roof. I feel very safe. I know that I'll be moving soon, so I don't want to feel too settled in this like one physical building. But the friendships that I'm creating with people like over the last year and like my community and that my kids are building up for themselves, like those are the things that matter more, feeling secure in a community or feeling like it's home.
Yeah. It's interesting. I thought it was interesting too. Here's like falling back on like some of the laziest literary analytic tricks. Especially because, well, let me say what it is first and then I'll analyze my analysis. But the intentional use of the word home rather than like house or like dwelling or like compound. Again, this is, I'm assuming, translated from a different language. And I don't know if it has the same, if there's that same distinguishing, there's that same distinction. That's the word I was looking for. If there's that same distinction between like house and home. But I do very strongly feel like the translator intentionally used the word home to lead us in this direction. Yeah. You know, it's like home is where the heart is. You know what I mean? It's like home is not a building. Home is where you have a community, where you have family. Yeah. This also reminded me of like a friend that I have. And I don't know why. It's like one of those weird things where, I don't know, I guess it's just used as like an analogy, but she's like, she talks about like, if we were in like an apocalypse like situation or like a survival situation, she's like, I wouldn't survive because like, I don't have any skills. It's like, I don't have any useful skills. And what she's thinking of, it's like being able to like build things or like hunt or, you know, whatever. But like, but this friend is like one of the most social, like best with people that I know. Yeah. And like in her life right now, it's like, yeah, she doesn't know how to build stuff. She doesn't know how to do it. It's like, but she gets like, you know, playgrounds built in her backyard and all these things because she's friends with all these people that do have all of these skills. And I was like, you have the most important survival skill of all of us. Cause it's like, oh, there's one guy that can like, oh, maybe he knows how to build things, but like he can only build things, you know, assuming he didn't have as like robust of a social network or whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's like, if you've got these like a couple of great skills, like you have access to those couple of great skills. But when you have those skills of like making friends and like establishing community and like creating, you know, community of people around you that like love and adore you, you know, it's like you can get anything that you need because you have access to the skills of all of these people.
Those social connections are what make humans so formidable. Yeah. On the planet is because we have those social skills, because like we work together in teams. And yeah, when you're the type of person that you remember what people's skills are and you honor the fact that they have that skills and you network them where you connect them with other people who have similar like skills and goals, or you say to yourself like, this person is really good at building things like playground equipment. This person's really good with children. This person is really good at communicating with parents and businesses. And maybe we could create like a school or something. Like people who are able to network and get along with others and encourage them. Like, yeah, that's a skill. Yeah. And so this guy, he will never want for anything like in this story, because if something bad were to happen to him, as like if one of his houses, like he finishes building some houses and his house burns down, he's not going to be sleeping outside in the mud.
Yeah.
That would be ridiculous. He's just going to go to his friend's house and then his friends will help him like rebuild, because that is community. And when he has his house finished being built, he's probably going to bring all of his friends to come and hang out at his place, because he's got those blood brothers and the like eternal vows of like friendship. And so, yeah, he's creating a whole network for himself.
Yeah. And this also reminded me of something that I heard recently that, like, I don't know, it was one of those things that like just hit me like really deeply. Like I was like, oh man, yeah, I get that. And it was like, I don't know, it's stuck in my brain, and I am hoping that it's going to, like influence, it's like a not to be dramatic, but like a life-changing like idea or something, like when it just like clicks, and it's like, and even if it's just slightly, it's like, I feel like this thing hit me and my life like shifted like 1 degree. And for right now, it's like, oh, it's pretty much the same, but I'm hoping that like leads to a better place when that 1 degree gets further and further away from where we are now. But that idea was about compound interest, which is like something you hear about all the time. And it was from this guy, Naval Ravikant. I was like listening to a podcast that he was talking to somebody, and he's like he's a billionaire, like investor, and invests in a lot of like tech companies and whatever. But he's got like, he's a really, really good communicator. He's got a lot of like a good way of communicating ideas. And he was talking about compound interest, but he wasn't talking about it in the sense of like money and like investments and stuff like that. I mean, he was obviously, but he's like, but there are so many things that like compound. And one of the things he was talking about is like relationships and friendships. Like you're doing those things and putting in the effort. And it's like, and every bit of effort that you put into relationships and friendships, like that sort of thing with good people, it's like that sort of thing like compounds down the line. So like the earlier you get started, the more you continually put like little deposits into these like friendships and relationships, like they just become like invaluable, like further down the line. And he related to a lot of things like health too. It's like health and like physical fitness, whatever. It's like just doing kind of dumb, repetitive little things, like putting in your deposit every single day. But it's like, but it pays off really good dividends, like down the line. And it's just like, there's like a thing that has to do with like patience and whatever and stuff in there too. But it's just like, I feel like this is exactly what he was talking about, where it's like this person, the younger son was investing his time in these relationships that are going to be way more valuable than, and the other brother was investing his time in something that is valuable too. But it's like, but that doesn't compound. Like as soon as those huts are done being built, they're starting to fall apart, as soon as he opens the door one time, like those hinges are not how they were before. As soon as he like accidentally bumps into the wall.
Yeah.
Which, man, I feel that because we moved into a house and it's like a pretty new house. And so like every time like my kids put their like hand on the wall, like getting it dirty, or like I like fall and like bump into something, like, oh my gosh, I'm like just destroying this place.
You talking about that, like, I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to cry. I think I'll be good. But no, I was like, it was starting to make me kind of like tear up, because I was thinking about when I moved away after like living in one place for like 10 years. And I had asked for, because we weren't going to have time or anything to kind of like throw a goodbye party, because we were in the middle of trying to like sell. We were in the middle of trying to pack up and like move. I wasn't going to be able to do kind of like another thing, but I wanted an opportunity to say goodbye to people. And so I told everybody before I moved that we would be having kind of like an open house the last day that we were there. And if they wanted to come and sit and talk, or if they wanted to come and help pack a box, I just wanted the opportunity to hug them goodbye, see them one last time before like we left. And all day long, people, like some people that I had known for a decade, some people who were family members, but family members I had not been close to until I moved and lived close to them. And then people who I had only known them for like a year, people all in that range, people who had gone with my kids to school, people who had watched my kids while we were going through like hard things, people who I had watched their kids when they were going through hard things, people who I had gone to be with them in the hospital when family members died, had been like, it was just like all day long, this like stream of people coming in, helping to either box stuff up or remove stuff that we didn't need in the house anymore, or that we didn't want to have people helping all day long doing that stuff. And it was just this steady stream of people like nonstop. And I was just thinking about all the memories that I had with those people as I'm watching them do this like final act of service for me before I leave, and them thanking me for all I had done for them while I was living there. And like, it was just one of the most beautiful moments of like community and like feeling I had everything that I had done while I was like living there to encourage those relationships. That it was all coming back to me. And I don't know, just like this compounding effect of love, like that you were like talking about, of just like those little deposits into like friendship where you are just like, you're giving, you're receiving, you're giving, you're receiving, like back and forth. And you over time create this like very strong bond of history between you. And you build up this like community where it is like, when I need to get all this stuff in boxes, I have an army of people that are like, hey, I have an hour, and that out like today, because I have a busy life, but that hour is yours. And it's like just all day seeing beautiful, wonderful people that I've put love into and that have put love into me.
Yeah. This is like really cool. I really like this story for that reason too. It's like both of these stories like taught lessons that were not what we would have expected, you know, like about kindness, and then also about like relationship building over hustle and grind culture.
Yeah.
So it was nice. They're both really nice.
Both of those stories, I felt like they were so striking to me and so interesting to me, because it was like they started off and I did not know where they were going to end up. And I was wrong. Like, as I'm trying to think of, because like, obviously, guys, I've read a lot of fairy tales. I don't know if you guys know this about me. I've read a lot of fairy tales. And so I see like kind of the, you know, the same plots coming up and happening like over and over. I mean, even in these two stories that we just told, you've got an old man and sons, and the old man is dying and he's asking their sons to do something. We've seen that set up. I mean, obviously twice in this episode, but so many times in other stories, it's such like a common like setup to, oh, here's the dilemma. These three sons need to pick a bride before their father dies, and the one that picks the best bride is going to inherit the castle or whatever. And so they're shooting arrows off into the swamp. And but yeah, you like that. It starts off so familiar, and so it was so great to, as I'm reading this story, realize I don't know where it's going. And the reason why I don't know where it's going is because it's written from a culture that I'm less familiar with. So what a great opportunity it was to be reading some Ethiopian tales and enjoying what other cultures can teach us about how we value relationships.
Thank you for listening to The Fairy Tellers. If you enjoy what we're doing, please leave us a review or share us with your friends. For access to exclusive bonus content, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thefairytellers. Special thanks to Andy Forey for our music and to Clarice Inch for our artwork. And of course, a big thank you to all our patrons. Without all of you, this show wouldn't be possible.
Good stories pay little attention to cultural or linguistic frontiers. The student of story collections find themselves adrift on an ocean of stories, an ocean which is boundless, deep, and ceaseless in motion. Robert Irwin. Yeah, and it kind of is this like, and it kind of is this kind of like, you did it, Katrina. You said kind of 1 million times. Great sentence. You're a genius. Some of that sounded like positive self-talk, but it was said in a self-deprecating way.
Yeah. Positive self-talk doesn't count when it's said with negative self-evaluation. I don't know. I started that sentence thinking that I would get somewhere in the end, and I only kind of did.
You know what? You did great.
Thanks.
So what had I been saying?
You said kind of a lot.
Yeah.